The soup hit my lap before I even saw it coming. 1 second I was reaching for my water glass, smiling at something Aaron had said about his week at work. The next second, scalding liquid soaked through my khaki pants and burned my thighs like fire. I shouted in pain, jumping up from the chair so fast it tipped backward and clattered against their hardwood floor. My hands shook as I stared down at the spreading stain, steam still rising from my lap. The burning sensation intensified with each passing second, sharp and relentless. I looked up expecting concern, expecting someone to rush for ice or towels or something to help. Instead, I heard laughter. Not polite chuckles or nervous giggles, but full-throated laughter that echoed off their dining room walls. Aaron doubled over, slapping the table hard enough to make the wine glasses shake. Julia covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook with amusement, her eyes squeezed shut with the effort of laughing. And Emily, my 16-year-old granddaughter, stood there with the empty soup pot in her hands, smirking like she'd just pulled off the prank of the century. She made no move to apologize or help. My chest tightened as reality crashed over me harder than the soup had. "Grandpa, you should see your face right now," Emily said through her giggles, setting the pot down on the counter without a care in the world. My skin was screaming, my dignity was shattered, and she thought it was entertainment worthy of a standing ovation. Julia finally stood up, but only to grab her phone from the kitchen counter. "Oh my God, I wish I'd recorded that," she said, wiping tears from her eyes with her manicured fingers. "That would have been perfect for the family group chat." Aaron came over and patted my shoulder like I was a dog who'd performed a trick he'd been training me for. "Come on, Dad, lighten up. It's just soup. No harm done, right?" I stared at him, searching desperately for any sign that my son understood what had just happened to his father. But his eyes held nothing except amusement and maybe a hint of impatience that I wasn't laughing along with their cruel joke. "Let me get you a towel," Julia said, her tone making it abundantly clear this was an inconvenience to her carefully planned evening. I stood there dripping, burning, and utterly alone in a room full of my own family, wondering when exactly I had become their source of comedic relief rather than someone they loved. The bathroom mirror showed an old man I barely recognized anymore. Red blotches covered my thighs where the soup had soaked through the fabric, angry welts already forming on the most sensitive areas. My hands still trembled as I dabbed at the burns with a cold washcloth Julia had tossed at me like she was feeding a stray dog. Through the door, I could hear them continuing dinner like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just watched me get burned and humiliated. Silverware clinked against plates in a familiar rhythm. Someone mentioned dessert, probably the expensive cheesecake Julia had been bragging about ordering from that fancy bakery downtown. Emily's voice drifted through, asking if she could go to a friend's house later tonight. Not one person had knocked to check if I was okay or if I needed medical attention. I'd brought a cherry pie from Morrison's Bakery, the expensive one I couldn't really afford on my teacher's pension, the one that had cost me $23. I'd thought maybe it would make Emily smile, maybe remind her that her grandfather cared about her and wanted to celebrate with her. Now it sat on their counter, probably waiting to be cut and served without me, without anyone even remembering who had brought it. The drive home took 40 minutes through Sunday evening traffic that seemed deliberately designed to prolong my misery. Every traffic light seemed to turn red just as I approached, forcing me to sit and feel the throbbing pain in my legs. My legs throbbed where the burns were worst, a constant reminder of what had just happened. I'd changed into a pair of Aaron's old gym shorts before leaving, my soaked pants stuffed in a grocery bag on the passenger seat, evidence I couldn't quite bring myself to throw away yet. The silence in my old Honda felt different than usual tonight, heavier somehow. Not peaceful or contemplative like it normally was, but heavy, like the weight of something fundamental breaking inside me that couldn't be repaired. I thought about all the Sunday dinners before this one, stretching back years. All the times I'd shown up with gifts, with stories from my teaching days, with my best attempt at being a good grandfather who stayed connected. All the times Emily had barely looked up from her phone except to ask if I'd brought money for her latest want. All the times Aaron had asked about my finances instead of my health or happiness. I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot and sat for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The bag with my ruined pants sat beside me like evidence of a crime I couldn't quite name yet. My apartment felt smaller that night, the walls seeming to close in on me. I lived in a two-bedroom place I'd moved to after Helen died 10 years ago, unable to stay in the house where we'd raised Aaron. Our old house had been too big, too full of memories that hurt more than they comforted. This place was supposed to be practical, affordable, close to Aaron's family, so I could be the involved grandfather I'd always imagined being. I'd picked it specifically so I could be nearby for Emily and Noah, my grandchildren, so I could attend their school events and be present for birthdays and holidays. So I could be involved, present, useful to their lives. Now it just felt like a box where an old man waited to die alone and forgotten. I made myself tea but couldn't drink it, the liquid cooling untouched in the chipped mug Helen had given me on our 30th anniversary. I sat at my small kitchen table and stared at the stack of mail I'd been ignoring for days. Bills, mostly, each one a reminder of how carefully I had to budget on my pension. A letter from my insurance company about changing coverage. A flyer from a funeral home that always made me uncomfortable with its cheerful promises about affordable final arrangements. And underneath it all, buried in my drawer, the folder I kept with all my important documents, the ones that spelled out what would happen to everything I owned after I was gone. I pulled it out slowly, my hands steadier now than they'd been at dinner. The trust documents spelled it all out in neat legal language that somehow made life and death feel bureaucratic and simple. Upon my death, everything I owned would transfer to Aaron as primary beneficiary, no questions asked. The small savings account with about $78,000 I'd scraped together over 40 years of teaching high school English, saving 5% of every paycheck even when money was impossibly tight. The life insurance policy worth another $50,000 that I'd maintained faithfully, paying premiums every month without fail. The lake cabin up north that Helen and I had bought in 1987 for $30,000, now worth maybe $200,000 given how property values had climbed in the decades since. Even my car, my furniture, my collection of first edition books I'd gathered over decades of haunting used bookstores. All of it, carefully itemized and assigned to Aaron, with the understanding he'd share appropriately with his children when the time came. I'd set it up that way because that's what you did, what my parents had done, what everyone did. You took care of your family even after death. You made sure they were provided for. You didn't let your life's work disappear into nothing or go to strangers. But as I read those words now, sitting alone with burns on my legs, something felt fundamentally wrong about it all. Monday morning came too early, sunlight stabbing through my bedroom curtains at 6:30 like it always did. My legs still hurt, red marks blooming into small blisters that pulled tight when I walked. I called my doctor's office as soon as they opened at 8 and explained what happened, leaving out the part about it being deliberate. The nurse told me to come in immediately if they got worse or showed signs of infection, but said minor burns from food usually healed on their own within a week or two. Keep them clean and covered. She instructed in a voice that suggested she dealt with clumsy old people burning themselves all the time. And be more careful around the kitchen, Mr. Harrison. I didn't correct her assumption that I'd done this to myself, that my own carelessness was to blame. At 10 o'clock, after pacing my apartment for an hour rehearsing what I'd say, I called the law office of Franklin and Associates. Mr. Daniels had handled Helen's estate when she passed and had drawn up our wills years before that. He was maybe 50, sharp as a tack, and had always treated me with respect rather than the condescension some lawyers showed to older clients who didn't understand legal jargon. His secretary put me through after a brief hold filled with classical music. "Mark, good to hear from you," he said warmly, genuinely pleased. "What can I do for you today?" I took a breath and told him everything, every humiliating detail. "Mark," Mr. Daniels finally said after several long seconds of silence, his voice careful and measured. "I want to make sure I understand correctly what you're telling me. Your granddaughter deliberately poured hot soup on you, causing second-degree burns that required medical attention, and your son and his wife thought it was funny? They laughed at your pain." I confirmed it, the words tasting bitter and shameful in my mouth, like admitting this made me complicit somehow. "And you're calling because you're wondering about your estate plan and what options you have." It wasn't a question, but a statement. He understood immediately what I was considering, what had brought me to pick up the phone. "You should know that you're under absolutely no legal obligation to leave anything to anyone," he continued, his voice strengthening with conviction. "Adult children, even grandchildren, have no automatic right to inherit from you under the law. You can structure your estate however you want, leave it to whoever you choose. You could leave everything to a cat shelter if that's your wish, and it would be completely valid and legally binding. Something in his words unlocked a door I hadn't known was there, hadn't known I was allowed to open. Can we meet? I asked, my voice steadier than it had been in days. This afternoon? He checked his calendar, papers rustling. 2 o'clock work for you? I said yes, and marked it carefully on the wall calendar by my phone. Mr. Daniels' office sat on the 3rd floor of a building downtown, the kind with industrial carpeting worn thin in the high-traffic areas and fluorescent lights that hummed constantly like angry bees. His desk was organized chaos, files stacked neatly but everywhere, covering nearly every surface. He gestured for me to sit in a leather chair that squeaked when I settled into it. Before we start making any changes, he said, pulling out a fresh legal pad and uncapping an expensive-looking pen, I need to ask if you're doing this out of temporary anger or genuine conviction. Courts look unfavorably on estate changes made in the heat of emotion, and I need to know your state of mind is sound. I appreciated the question more than he knew. It meant he was taking me seriously as a client, not just humoring an upset old man. I'm angry, I admitted, feeling the truth of it in my chest. But this isn't sudden or impulsive. This was just the final proof of something I've been trying not to see for years, maybe a decade. I told him about the money I'd given Aaron over the years, amounts I'd tracked carefully in my own records. The $10,000 for his house down payment when he and Julia got married. The $8,000 when his car broke down and he needed a replacement immediately. The constant birthday checks for the grandchildren, each one getting larger. The bailed-out credit cards when Julia's shopping got out of control. Mr. Daniels wrote steadily, his pen scratching across yellow paper. Who would you want as beneficiaries instead, he asked. The question stumped me for a moment. I'd been so focused on removing Aaron that I hadn't thought about where things should go instead. There's a literacy foundation I've donated to for years, I said slowly. Reading Futures. They help kids in low-income schools. Mr. Daniels nodded, writing. And I have 2 friends from my teaching days, Patricia and Thomas. They've checked on me more in the past year than my son has. More notes. Any other family members? I thought about Noah, Aaron's younger son. He was 14, quiet, had always been kind to me. My other grandson, Noah. But I want to wait and see how things develop before deciding about him. Mr. Daniels looked up. We can create a flexible structure. Trust documents that can be amended more easily than a will. The conversation lasted 90 minutes. By the end, we had a plan. The new documents would take 2 weeks to prepare properly. Mr. Daniels wanted everything airtight, no room for Aaron to contest successfully. He suggested including a clause explaining my reasoning, something judges looked favorably upon. It shows sound mind and clear intent, he explained. You're not acting on impulse or confusion. You're making a reasoned decision based on treatment you received. I agreed to write a statement describing the soup incident and the pattern of disrespect that led to this choice. One more thing, Mr. Daniels said as I prepared to leave. Once we finalize this, I'd recommend you don't tell Aaron until after you've passed. Otherwise, you might face pressure, manipulation, or worse. But I had different ideas. Revenge on paper, hidden until death, felt hollow. I wanted them to know. I wanted them to feel exactly what I'd felt sitting in their dining room, burning and humiliated. Actually, I said, I want to tell them myself. Soon. The call came on Thursday. Aaron's voice on my answering machine, cheerful and completely oblivious. Hey Dad, we're having a little birthday thing for Emily on Saturday. Nothing big, just family and a few of her friends. Figured you'd want to be there. Maybe bring one of those pies she likes. See you at 6. I played the message 3 times, listening to the casual expectation in his tone. Of course I'd come. Of course I'd bring an expensive bakery pie. Of course I'd pretend nothing had happened 5 days ago. My legs still showed faint red marks from the burns. I looked at my calendar, at the appointment I had with Mr. Daniels on Friday to review the final trust documents. The timing was almost too perfect. I called Aaron back and left my own message, keeping my voice warm and grandfatherly. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll bring something special. That was true enough. Just not what they expected. Friday afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Daniels reviewing the revised trust documents, reading each page carefully even though the legal language made my head hurt. Everything had been changed, completely restructured. Reading Futures would receive $50,000 to fund literacy programs for underprivileged children. Patricia and Thomas would each get $25,000, enough to make a real difference in their retirement years. The remaining assets, including the cabin and my life insurance policy, would go into a charitable trust one could designate recipients for later. Aaron's name appeared only once in the entire document, in a clause stating he was intentionally excluded due to persistent disrespect and emotional cruelty toward the grantor over an extended period. The detailed statement I'd written about the soup incident was attached as an exhibit, along with a timeline of other instances when they'd treated me poorly. "This is solid," Mr. Daniels said, reviewing it one final time. "And you're absolutely certain about the timing of disclosure? You're still planning to tell them tomorrow at the birthday party?" I told him my plan in detail, how I'd wrap the documents as a gift. His eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "That's bold, Mark. Incredibly bold. Are you prepared for their reaction? It could get ugly." I thought about Julia saying, "Lighten up, Dad, it's just soup," while I sat there burning. I thought about Aaron's smirk. "I'm ready." I spent Saturday morning wrapping the envelope in gold paper I'd bought at the dollar store, the cheap, shiny kind that crinkled loudly. It looked festive, almost cheerful, sitting on my kitchen counter next to my coffee mug. Inside was a letter I'd written late the night before, explaining what the legal documents meant using simple language so even Emily could understand without needing a lawyer to translate. I'd also included a complete copy of the trust revision for their records, every page showing exactly how I'd redistributed what they'd been counting on inheriting. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was giving them the worst gift of their lives wrapped in celebration paper meant for joy and happiness. I dressed carefully in my good slacks and a button-down shirt Helen had bought me years ago, back when we still went to nice restaurants together. I looked in the mirror and practiced keeping my face neutral, pleasant even, grandfatherly and harmless. I needed to seem like the same old grandpa who showed up with pies and checkbooks and unconditional forgiveness. The element of surprise was crucial to my plan working. At 5:30, I loaded the gold package carefully into my car and drove toward their house, my heart beating steady and strong for the first time in days. Today they'd learn what it felt like to have something painful dumped on them without warning, without mercy, without anyone caring about the damage it caused. Aaron's house glowed with party lights when I arrived, strings of white bulbs wrapped around the porch columns. Cars lined the street for half a block, more than I'd expected for a small family gathering. Through the windows I could see teenagers clustered in groups, paper plates loaded with appetizers in hand, music thumping from invisible speakers. Julia answered the door wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair and makeup done professionally. "Mark, you made it." She air-kissed near my cheek without actually making contact, her perfume overwhelming and expensive. Come in, come in. Emily will be so excited you're here." I doubted that sincerely, but I smiled and stepped inside, the gold package tucked under my arm. The living room was packed with people I didn't recognize, Emily's school friends and their parents, neighbors, relatives of Julia's I'd never met. Emily sat on the couch surrounded by friends, gift bags and wrapped boxes piled around her feet like tribute to a young queen. She glanced up when I entered, her eyes immediately dropping to the gold package in my hands with barely concealed interest. For a brief second, something like greed flashed across her young face, quickly replaced by practiced indifference. Aaron appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of expensive-looking appetizers arranged artfully. "Dad, hey, we were starting to worry you'd forgotten." As if I'd ever forgotten a grandchild's birthday in my life. As if they hadn't literally burned me in this very room 5 days ago. Dinner was catered Italian, spread across their dining room table like a magazine photo shoot someone had carefully styled. Pasta in silver chafing dishes, chicken marsala, Caesar salad in a wooden bowl bigger than any I owned, fresh bread that filled the house with its warm smell. The same table where I'd been scalded, the same chair where I'd sat burning while they laughed. I found myself staring at my old spot, remembering the pain and humiliation so clearly it felt like yesterday. Julia noticed my hesitation as everyone filed toward the table. "You can sit there, Mark. We cleaned it thoroughly after your little accident last week. No stains or anything." Her tone suggested I should be grateful for this bare minimum of consideration, this basic human decency. I sat carefully, The gold package balanced on my lap, its weight somehow significant. Aaron raised a glass of red wine for a toast, his face flushed with the pleasure of hosting successfully. To Emily, he said loudly, projecting so everyone could hear. 16 years old today? We couldn't be prouder of the young woman she's becoming. Smart, beautiful, confident. Everything parents could hope for in a daughter. Everyone echoed the toast, glasses clinking. I lifted my water glass, silent, watching Emily beam at the attention. She was soaking it in like she deserved every bit of praise, like being 16 and pretty was an achievement worth celebrating. She'd gotten her sense of entitlement honestly, I realized with bitter clarity. Her parents had modeled it perfectly for years. Grandpa hasn't given his present yet, Julia announced when the pile of torn wrapping paper and open gifts had dwindled to almost nothing. All eyes turned to me, a dozen pairs of teenage eyes and their parents, everyone curious. I stood slowly, my knees protesting the movement, making me feel every one of my 72 years. I walked around the table and placed the gold package directly in front of Emily with steady hands. She grabbed it eagerly, shaking it next to her ear like a child trying to guess what was inside. It's light, she said, her voice carrying distinct disappointment already. What is it, like a check or something? Some of her friends laughed at her bluntness. I stayed quiet, waiting, letting the moment build. She ripped the paper off without any care for the wrapping, revealing the plain manila envelope underneath. Her face fell dramatically. An envelope? Seriously? She looked at Aaron and Julia for explanation, for rescue from this disappointing reality. Maybe it's stocks, Aaron suggested hopefully, trying to salvage the moment. Dad's always talking about investments and planning for the future. Emily unsealed the flap and pulled out the documents inside, her freshly manicured nails catching on the paper. She frowned at the legal language, clearly confused by words like beneficiary and irrevocable trust. What even is this? Her voice had an edge to it now, the first hint that this wasn't going according to her expectations. I sat back down in my chair, folding my hands calmly on the table in front of me. Why don't you read it out loud? Emily's voice faltered as she read the opening paragraph of my letter, her confident tone cracking. To Aaron, Julia, and Emily. After careful consideration and consultation with my attorney, I have revised my estate plan. Effective immediately, you are no longer beneficiaries of my trust, my will, or any of my assets upon my death. The room went absolutely silent, the kind of silence where you could hear breathing. Even the background music from someone's phone seemed to stop. Emily looked up at me, her face pale, all the birthday color draining away. What does this mean? Grandpa, what are you saying? Julia snatched the papers from her hands roughly, scanning them quickly with increasingly wide eyes. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to pure anger in rapid succession. This is insane, she hissed, her voice shaking. You can't do this to us. You can't just change everything because your feelings got hurt. Aaron grabbed the documents next, his eyes moving faster and faster down the page, taking in the names of charities and friends who would now get what he'd been counting on. I watched him reach the part about reading futures and my old teaching friends getting the money. Watched his jaw clench. Watched his face turn progressively redder. Dad, he said, his voice dangerously quiet and controlled. What the hell is this supposed to be? Some kind of sick joke? I met his eyes steadily, calmly, with no fear. It's exactly what it says. You're cut off. Completely. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. Aaron slammed his fist on the table hard enough to rattle dishes and knock over a wine glass, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth. You senile old bastard, you can't do this to your own family. His face was purple with rage. Julia's voice went shrill, piercing, the kind of voice that hurt ears. We've taken care of you for years. Invited you into our home. Included you in everything. And this is how you repay us? With betrayal? Emily started crying, loud dramatic sobs that made her friends shift uncomfortably in their seats and look at their phones. Grandpa, why would you ruin my birthday like this? What did I ever do to you? I let them rage for a long moment, their voices overlapping into a chorus of indignation and disbelief and wounded entitlement. Then I stood up and pulled out the photograph I'd printed from my phone and carried in my jacket pocket. It showed my burned legs the night of the soup incident, red and blistered and clearly painful. I placed it on the table where everyone could see it clearly. "This is why," I said quietly, letting the image speak. The room went silent again, but this silence was different, heavier with judgment. Last Sunday, Emily deliberately poured scalding soup on me. It burned through my pants and left these marks on my 72-year-old skin. I pointed to the photo with a steady finger. And you all laughed. Every single one of you. You thought my pain was entertainment. Julia tried to recover first, her voice shifting gears rapidly. "Oh, come on. That was an accident. We were all just joking around, keeping things light. You know how it is." Her voice had shifted to something almost sweet, placating, the voice she probably used on difficult clients. "Kids do silly things sometimes. You know Emily didn't mean anything serious by it." I turned to Emily directly, ignoring her mother. "Did you mean to pour soup on me?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked desperately at her mother for guidance, for the right answer. "I was just playing around," she finally mumbled, wiping at her tears. "You're always so serious at dinner, so quiet. We thought you'd laugh too if we lightened the mood." Aaron jumped in, his anger giving way to calculated damage control, the kind he probably used in business negotiations. "Dad, you're clearly upset about a misunderstanding. But this is completely insane. You can't disinherit your whole family over one incident, one moment. That's not how family works." I shook my head slowly, sadly. "It's not one incident, son. It's years of you treating me like nothing more than a checkbook with legs. Years of Emily ignoring me unless she wants money for something. Years of Julia making jokes about how I'm the bank that never closes. Remember that, Julia? You said it at Noah's birthday last year." Everyone laughed then too. The dinner guests had started gathering their things, sensing the party was definitively over and wanting to escape the awkwardness. Emily's friends whispered to each other urgently, phones out, thumbs flying across screens, probably texting everyone they knew about the drama unfolding. Good. Let the story spread. Let everyone know what kind of people the Harrison family really were behind their perfect facade. Aaron grabbed my arm as I moved toward the door, his grip tight enough to hurt. "You're destroying this family," he hissed in my ear, his breath hot against my face. "Over what? Your feelings got hurt. Grow up, Dad. Be a man about this." I pulled my arm free, his grip leaving red marks that would probably bruise. "I built my life so you'd have opportunities one never had," I said, loud enough for everyone still in the room to hear clearly. "I taught school for 40 years, saved every penny I could, never took a vacation I couldn't afford, never bought myself anything nice. And I thought family meant something. I thought it meant loyalty and respect and love. But you've taught me different. You've taught me that to you. I'm just a resource to be exploited." I looked around the room at the faces watching us. Family doesn't laugh when you're hurt. Family doesn't treat you like a joke. So congratulations, you finally taught the old man something valuable. You taught me to protect myself from people who don't value me. I made it to my car before the shaking started, adrenaline coursing through my body like electricity. My hands trembled so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition, missing the slot twice before it slid home. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. No more pretending, no more swallowing disrespect with a smile, no more being their personal ATM while they mocked me behind my back. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and blurred vision. My phone started ringing before I even reached my apartment building, Aaron's name flashing on the screen over and over. I silenced it without answering. Then Julia called, her name appearing insistently. Silenced. Then texts started flooding in, dozens of them in rapid succession, ranging from angry threats about legal action to desperate pleas about reconsidering. I turned the phone completely off and set it on my kitchen counter, cutting off their access to me. The silence in my apartment felt different now, transformed somehow. Not empty and lonely like it had been for years, but clean, pure, like I'd finally swept out years of accumulated garbage and emotional debris. I made myself tea with hands that had stopped shaking and sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Tomorrow would bring more anger, more attempts at manipulation and guilt. But tonight, right now in this moment, I'd sleep better than I had in years. Sunday morning, I went to church like always. I'd been attending Hope Community Church since Helen died, finding comfort in the familiar rituals. People greeted me warmly, asking about my week. I'd become friendly with several members, sharing coffee after service. Today, though, I had a different purpose. When the pastor asked if anyone had announcements, I stood up. My legs felt steady. I'd like to share something with you all, I said, my voice carrying across the sanctuary. Some of you know I've been struggling with family issues lately. Well, I've made a decision I'm at peace with, but I want you to hear it from me directly. I told them everything. The soup incident, the laughter, the years of financial exploitation, the revised trust. I pulled no punches, named names, laid it all bare. The congregation listened in stunned silence. When I finished, several people were crying. After church, at least a dozen people approached me with support. Patricia, my old teaching colleague, hugged me tightly. You did the right thing, Mark. Helen would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. Thomas shook my hand firmly. Took guts to make that speech. But people needed to know the truth. Even strangers came up, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and boundary setting. I felt lighter with each conversation, like I'd been carrying shame that wasn't mine to bear. The story spread through Spokane faster than I could have imagined. By Monday, I got calls from 3 different people who knew Aaron through business connections. They'd heard about what happened at the birthday party from Emily's friend's parents. By Wednesday, Julia's own mother called me. Mark, what have you done? She demanded. You've humiliated my daughter and granddaughter in front of the entire community. I told her to ask them about the soup. She hung up on me. 2 months passed before Noah reached out to me. The silence from Aaron's household had been complete, absolute, like I'd died already. Then one Saturday morning, a knock came at my apartment door. Noah stood there when I opened it, his 14-year-old face serious beyond his years, carrying a weight he shouldn't have to bear. Grandpa, can we talk? Please. I invited him in immediately, my heart beating faster with hope I was afraid to acknowledge. I'd been wondering about Noah constantly, whether he'd side with his parents or see through their manipulation and greed. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd opened the envelope of trust documents that had started everything. I need you to know something important, Noah said carefully, choosing his words like he'd rehearsed this conversation. I didn't laugh that night when Emily poured soup on you. I thought it was horrible, cruel. I told Mom and Dad later they should apologize to you. But they said you were overreacting and being too sensitive. Relief and sadness mixed in my chest like oil and water. Why didn't you say anything to me directly? He looked down at his hands, young fingers picking at a fingernail. I was scared they'd get mad at me. I know that's cowardly, but I'm only 14. I still live in their house. His honesty touched something deep in me. What made you come today? I asked gently. I heard what you did, taking them out of your will. Noah met my eyes directly. Everyone's talking about it. Mom and Dad are furious. Emily's friends all know the story now. They're getting treated differently at their country club, people avoiding them. And I realized something important. You weren't punishing us. You were standing up for yourself, finally protecting yourself from people who hurt you. His words echoed exactly what I'd needed someone to understand. I want you to know I'm nothing like them. Noah continued, his voice getting stronger. I don't want your money, Grandpa. I just want to know you're okay and that we can still have a relationship. That's when I started to cry, the first tears I'd shed through this entire ordeal. This kid, this good-hearted kid who'd been raised by wolves, understood something his parents never would.